Well, certainly my experience has been that cash flow is the lifeblood of any business, and one of the keen interests that I've had from very early on in my career is advising clients on their cash flow, and then when I became aware of the legislation like the Building and Construction Industry Security of Payments Act coming out, and that commenced in the year 2000, it was all geared around helping people within the building industry who undertake work to get cash flow into their business and help them survive. So it's always been a very high priority, in my view, in business. As the second reading speech said, that cash flow is the lifeblood of any business in the construction industry, and without it, then difficulties certainly arise, and builders, subcontractors, suppliers alike just can't keep going without getting regular cash payments. I guess there's a commonality in all of it, in my view. It is tying up the cash and not billing early enough and invoicing for the work that you've done, letting those payments sit out unrecovered as debtors for 60, 90 days, and allowing builders and developers to hold out for payment of that cash. And it's an interesting question that you raised, because some of these big builders, in my experience, they tend to go into insolvency when there's a lot of work around, and they tend to tie up a lot of cash in bank guarantees that they need to, I guess, obtain the work first, and in order to get payments for off-site materials that they've purchased, they need to raise further bank guarantees so they can receive at least a cash payment. So they tie up a lot of their cash with bank guarantees and overdraft facilities to facilitate those bank guarantees. And then when the projects are on and they're difficult projects, the difficulties arise when unanticipated events happen, such as delays, and the failure then comes from just the project management team to properly identify those delays, obtain the delay damages that they could have under the contract. So failing to properly put in extension of time claims, variation claims in accordance with the contract terms, so builders are not precluded from, by time bars, from making those claims and then recovering those claims, is where, in my view, the risks lie. So there is a perennial problem, in my view, where not enough diligence is taken to recover those type of claims, where there is an ability to recover those additional costs where works are being undertaken outside of scope, and there's leaks that then form in the cash flow, because there is a lot more time spent on site, a lot more overheads spent in undertaking the project, and a lot more costs when builders are doing additional work without claiming for that work. So that's ultimately what I see as the problem, is not recovering those additional items that can help with the cash flow, and that stems from proper management of the project and understanding where a variation arises, then making that claim and recovering that claim. Similarly with delays and extensions of time, making the extension of time, getting the extension of time, and then recovering any delay costs and overheads that because of the extended time frame. In my view, I think it's certainly fraught with danger, and I see a lot of companies that do go in tight when there's a lack of work around, and to keep people employed and cash flow through the business, it in my view, creates a problem for them that it only takes one small event to happen, a delay, something that was missed in the tender stage to occur where there is additional money spent. So, at the end of the day, going in at little or very low margin can be a very problematic thing to have for a building company, because how do you then pay wages and I guess your suppliers, where you then have a shortfall in what your expectation was when you first tendered the job. Some people I do hear in the industry talk of going in at low margin and knowing that there's likely to be variation claims where they could try and pick up on some of that shortfall. And I've always been of the view that if you rely upon variations to make your profit margin, again, that's a very dangerous zone to enter into. In my experience, the best projects and the most profitable projects arise when there are no variations to the contract. Everyone is very clear on what's expected of them in terms of delivering the product, and variations don't come about. And when you have variations, and a lot of them, what tends to happen is that, as I indicated before, you get the leaks in trying to recover those, and you end up doing work for very little value, and those variations don't actually make you any money. You spend more time trying to undertake that additional work and then trying to recover it than the actual benefit that you gain from it. So yeah, very dangerous, I think, in terms of going in at very little margin. Yeah. Cash flow management, when you are initially kicking off a job, it's certainly ideal to try and front-end load your claims for payment, to try and give you that little bit of buffer, in my view, to kick off the project, order the materials and get the project underway with some cash in the bank, rather than trying to sort of creep it up right at the end. So my view is that if available and you've got the ability to make payment claims with some front-end loading or additional cash, or even better, with a deposit up front before you undertake the works, it definitely assists in the cash flow of any business. That way you're ahead all the way along the line, instead of trying to, like a lot of builders do work for a month without payment and then wait another 30, 60, 90 days for that payment that happened, for all the work that happened sort of 3 or 4 months ago. So that's where the difficulties lie, because you're waiting so long for payment. So if you can alleviate that by getting monies up front, it certainly helps with your cash flow. And those projections, some of the I guess the more astute builders will do those cash flow statements for them, so they'll know for each project where they sit from a cash flow negative or positive perspective each month to month. And that assists with planning and programming and avoids the pitfalls. So I've been a very high believer in, if you are running a project or running a business, then having the proper software to allow you to monitor your project costs, to basically fly your plane with instruments as opposed to without instruments, it's certainly a much better outcome at the end when you know where you're flying to, basically. So understanding cash flow statements, understanding profit and loss accounts, and understanding your project costs, where the project cost program interacts with your P&L, and you are properly monitoring those project costs, it can really advantage any builder, supplier, subcontractor, to understand where they sit month to month on the project. In terms of the legal work that I do, a lot of the times I try to advise clients before they get to the problems and try and save them. And most of the education that I do out there for my clients, I try and be proactive and get involved with their business, whatever it may be, and understand where they're heading, what their projects are. I would prefer to sit with, I guess the decision makers and understand the projects that are currently on foot, how we can assist to try and make these jobs more profitable than what we have anticipated, because I think that I can certainly add value in that regard. So rather than advising on a problem at the end, when we've discovered and clients have come to me, more often than not, right at the end saying, we lost a lot of money on this particular project, and we've now identified why. Well, we didn't make this claim for a variation, and we didn't identify that we had a delay here, so we're now making the claims. More often than not, that's just too late in a project. You need to be proactive in that type of environment and that business, because as a subcontractor or a builder where you're working for a developer, any of those costs need to come up very early, and those I guess who are project managers on behalf of developers want to understand where these extra costs are coming right at the time that they are notified, when they are incurred, because it makes it easy at that point in time to say, we can go back to our client to provide the builder with more money at that time because of the reasons it may be that there's been a variation for a very valid reason. And there's been a delay outside of the control of the builder or the subcontractor, so you can make those extension of time claims. It's far too late to do it right at the end when the developer, builder has thought that the project costs have ended, and then a claim comes through, and all it does is cause grief for everybody. So the earlier that people deal with them, the better for everybody and the project as a whole. Well, in my view, I know that 2 or 3 years ago there was a lot of larger builders, and some of the larger ones in New South Wales went into administration again with a lot of works in hand. I think there's been a lot more awareness out there. There was, I guess, the Collins report that came out, and there were some things and changes made to legislation, the Security Payments Act. There was a lot more awareness of people managing their cash flow, and I think since then, I guess another issue is that there's been a fair bit of activity. Interest rates have stayed low, but I think ultimately that there's been a bit more awareness of managing that cash flow, and I think the building industry as a whole has been a bit more educated in terms of, I guess, utilising the resources that are out there, the programs that you can now get to manage a project and identify issues that come up very early, and the utilisation of those programs, the advent of, I guess, more or less the professional builder that has had some form of an education through university or tertiary education, I think has also assisted, and knowing that these issues do arise and grappling with them early is the best way forward. So there's a combination of things, but ultimately I think it's more of that awareness, and having, not that a lot of there's been an increase in the use of security of payments legislation to improve cash flow, I think the knowledge that it's there and it's able to be used has assisted certainly subcontractors to trying to get the payments through, because they do have the alternative of going to an adjudicator, and that just slows up the process for everybody. And the ability to suspend work, at least having that legislation there, not that it's utilised a lot, but I know that builders are very mindful of, well, if we don't get payments through to our subcontractors, that there is an ability to put in a notice to suspend work without any liability on behalf of the subcontractors. So having that in the background, I think, in my view, has assisted. Yeah. You know what? It's surprisingly yes is the answer, and certainly they want to know what it is that ultimately makes other people in the same industry more successful, and they do listen to I guess myself when I sit around with project managers about certainly security of payments, the legislation that can affect them. If they're residential builders, like the Home Building Act and the requirements that they must meet in order to be paid, because certainly there are defences that can be raised if you're a builder in the residential sector and you haven't followed the proper tick the box about proposing a contract and entering a contract with clients, and that failure can certainly lead to disputes and ultimately not getting paid. So definitely good listeners, and I guess it's an industry that has a lot of legislation that impacts upon it. And when you're running a construction business, or even as a manager, there's the Work Health and Safety Act. There's a lot of legislation that can impose liability on not only the directors that own the business, but also people that are project managing and have some control over the operations of the business. There is personal liability that can attach to people if someone is injured on site, and builders, they tend to listen when they are, I guess, informed of the risks and what they're running, and they accept the advice. So yes, the answer is absolutely, yeah.